Chapter 13 has to do with prejudice, disliking others. Um, People do dislike each other. I mean, it's not like everybody likes everybody else. There's a war going on in the Middle East, Hamas and Israel. Um, Congress, uh, congressmen are hitting each other. Well, it happened once. They almost had a fight in the Senate hearing room. A lot of crazy stuff going on. So yes, it does occur. So let's go ahead and get started. Prejudice is a negative prejudgment of a group and its individual members. Some prejudgments can be positive, but those tend not to be troublesome and rarely lead to untoward treatment. Prejudice is an attitude, feelings, behaviors, and beliefs. Prejudices are maintained through stereotypes. Stereotypes are beliefs about the personal attributes of a group of people based on overgeneralizations and inaccuracies and resistant to new information. The untouchables or Dalit were the outcasts or people beyond the caste system in southern Asia, especially India. Their jobs or habits involve polluting activities. They're known as the pariah or Dalit. And let me show you something. This is a dating site for people from India. And if you do this, wait a minute. Browse profiles. Okay. And here you go. Here's all the castes that they have in India. So there's a number of them. The one that's on top are the Brahmin. They're the number one. And you don't see Dalit there at all. So if you are a Dalit or a pariah, you don't even have a caste system. Kind of interesting because they have outlawed, they've had trouble with this on some select college campuses. Sorry, there we go. On select college campuses, and the state of California has outlawed following the caste system. So this is something that's coming to the United States. Prejudice is a Prejudice is a negative attitude toward a group or its members. Discrimination is a negative behavior toward a group or its members. While discrimination often has its source in prejudicial attitudes, this does not have to be the case. Institutional discrimination may exist where prejudices have dictated treatment, but present attitudes do not support the treatment. And that's known as institutional discrimination. It's something that potentially you have suffered from in the court systems. It's something that African Americans certainly have suffered from in the South. That the laws that are written discriminate as much as people do. Any job that involved ending a life, such as fishing, killing, or disposing of dead cattle, or working with their hides, that was the job that the pariah did. This is a they, they're consuming a body, a human body, and that is done by the Dalit. No one else will touch it. Dead things they don't touch. People in India don't touch, but that's the job of the pariah or Dalit. Two institutional practices that support discriminatory practices are racism and sexism. Racism represents both an individual's prejudicial and discriminatory behavior toward people of a given race and institutional practices that subordinate people of a given race. Sexism represents both an individual's prejudicial and discriminatory behavior toward people of a given sex and institutional practices that subordinate people of a given sex. So sexism has to do with your gender, and racism has to do with your race. Any contact with human emissions such as sweat, urine, or feces, that's what the only a pariah can do that. This included occupational groups such as street sweepers and washermen, people who ate meat. This category included most of the primitive Indian hill tribes, and they are the pariah. Most of the women working as prostitutes in India are either pariah from India or women from surrounding areas of India, such as Nepal or Bhutan. Most were sold into prostitution by their families because their families were poor and starving, and the only way for them to survive was to sell a daughter into prostitution. Racial prejudice is prejudice against people of a specific race or ethnicity. Racial prejudice has led to some fairly horrendous genocides throughout the world. Racial separation was one of the hallmarks of the United States that persisted well into the 1970s, and it was fairly obvious, and it was institutional. The Jim Crow laws of the South were trying to separate the people who had been slaves from the individuals who, the white people in the South. With a history of 400 years of racial separation, it is unrealistic to assume that old wounds will heal automatically. And that is part of the problem that we've had in the United States for its entire history. Between the Civil War and the Civil Rights, white women, colored women, different bathrooms. These are the bathrooms right here, white men, colored men. And this is a drinking fountain, and only this is for blacks, and this other cooled one was for whites. But over here's the one for whites. White only, no pets. Help wanted, white only. Colored admission, 10 cents. This is at a movie theater. It's up in the balcony. All the white people get to sit on the ground floor. Colored waiting room. In 1998, 7,489 hate crime incidents occurred in the United States. A 1997 Gallup poll showed that half of African Americans had experienced some form of prejudice within the previous 30 days. In the same time frame, 10% of whites showed outward disdain for blacks. Of the three most numerous minorities in the United States, blacks tend to suffer the most severe racial discrimination. And these are the 2012 FBI statistics on hate crimes. Wait a minute. Single bias, offenses by bias, motivation, incidents, racial bias. There we go. Anti-black bias, 66.1% of the incidents were against African Americans, 22.4% were against whites. American Indians, 3.3. 3,297 single bias hate crimes. Religious bias in the United States, 59.7% for against Jewish people. That's a problem that we're having right now because of the Palestinian question in the Middle East. see what else we have. Anti-Hispanic, 59.4%. Anyway, okay. There were 6,121 hate crimes reported in 2016. After the Trump election, there were over 1,000 hate crimes a month in the first 6 months of 2017. Hate crime statistics from the FBI, maybe. There we go. Race and ethnicity, 59.6% of the single bias incidences were racial. 59.6% of the victims were targeted because of their offender's race of the 7,000. 2020 hate crime statistics. Maybe. There we go. Anti-black, there you go. Anti-white, anti-Latino, anti-Asian. And of course, of all the religious incidences, anti-Jewish incidences were the highest. While blatant racial prejudice seems to be declining, it seems that it is being replaced by an automatic emotional reaction. Individuals low in prejudice consciously try to suppress prejudicial thoughts and feelings. Individuals high in prejudice merely maintain their prejudiced thoughts and feelings. People may maintain a dual attitude system where they consciously control their prejudicial thoughts, but may maintain automatic habitual dislikes from childhood. While racial attitudes are based on xenophobia and otherness, gender prejudice is based on gender stereotypes that tend to be based on cultural understanding. Since everyone is related to at least one female, gender prejudice tends to be less exclusionary than racism. However, it still exists and has assumed women into a subordinate role even into modern times. And this is an old advertisement for legs were hose. It's nice to have a girl around the house. Look, he's got his foot on her head. Is it always illegal to kill a woman? This is a computer. You bet your sweet telex operator it is. Wow. 1970s, I think. You mean a woman can open it? Keep her where she belongs? I'm not exactly sure what that means. If your husband ever finds out you're not store testing for fresher coffee, I'm not exactly sure. Jason Sanborn. I don't think I even have that anymore. Show her it's a man's world. There she is feeding him breakfast in bed because he wears Van Heusen ties. And she's on her knees, of course. Wives, look at this ad over carefully. Circle the items you want for Christmas. Show it to your husband. If he does not go to the store immediately, cry a little, not a lot, just a little. He'll go, he'll go. Husbands, look at this ad over carefully. Pick out what your wife wants. Go buy it before she starts crying. What does she want? She wants a skillet. She wants a coffee maker. She wants an automatic toaster. She wants a can opener. She wants a blend mixers. Wow. Sooner or later, your wife will drive home one of the best reasons for owning a Volkswagen. Uh, it's tough, I guess. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. It's a cigar. One of the insidious aspects of gender prejudice is that females tend to maintain strong female stereotypes just as readily as men do. Attitudes toward women have changed as rapidly about women as the attitudes dealing with racial discrimination. However, most women do not feel discriminated against. That is something that happens to someone else. But of course, we are talking about the United States and democratic Western countries. Around the world, we find that two-thirds of the world's unschooled children are girls. In Saudi Arabia, women are forbidden to drive. I think they have actually passed a law that they can drive now, but there has to be a male relative in the car with them. The Taliban in Afghanistan, who took over the government after at the end of the Afghan war, would not allow women to go to school or have money. They flogged, terrorized, and left them physically and mentally ill. That is still going on in Afghanistan. It is estimated that 76 million females have been lost in China and India through selective abortions and infanticide since population control has been enacted. And of course, if you live in Saudi Arabia and you're female, then you have to cover. There you go. And you have to close your curtain so that men can't see you. This is something that you guys can look at later. I'm not going to read it. It's a little strange. Unequal status breeds prejudice. From time immemorial, masters have rationalized slavery by viewing their slaves as lazy, irresponsible, and lacking ambition. Though it is the economic inequalities that create the social inequality, those in power justify their wealth and power by stereotyping those without as lacking the drive for success. People tend to respect the competence of those high in status and like those who agreeably accept a lower status. Religion and prejudice. Studies in the 1990s found that church members express more racial prejudice than non-members. Those professing traditional or fundamentalist Christian beliefs express more prejudice than those professing less traditional beliefs. In 1982, a study found that faithful church attenders were less prejudiced than occasional attenders. The clergy were the most likely to oppose Hitler and were the most likely to support the civil rights movement. Gordon Allport sees the victims of racial discrimination reacting in two basic ways. Those that blame themselves tend to withdraw, participate in self-hate, and aggress against one's own group. Those that blame external causes tend to fight back, maintain a suspicious attitude, and increase group pride. When faced with a situation that might be prejudicial, the individual being discriminated against may react to the possibility by performing badly and losing their confidence. This is referred to as stereotype threat. Stereotype threat has been demonstrated in experiments, a form of self-fulfilling prophecy. If it says that you can't do math, by golly, you can't do math. And that's due to stereotype threat. Humans are gregarious. We like and need to live in groups. Our sense of self is not only a personal identity, but a social identity as well. Social identity is the group we identify with. Any discrimination of ourselves can be a social identity, in that we see ourselves as similar to those who have those traits. Without anyone to compare ourselves to, we wouldn't have an identity. John Turner and Henry Tajfel see people categorizing themselves, identifying ourselves within groups, comparing ourselves without groups. And if your high school had a basketball rival, This is one of the ways that you can see this as a microcosm. Um, your school had an enemy. My school just the college that I attended for my undergraduate work had played a football game this weekend, and my team lost. Uh, my team lost, but and that's not as important as some of the things that each side called the other. Um, Wabash College is all male, and there are various names that the people from DePauw refer to people from Wabash. One of them is the Wallies. Wallies was an effeminate male back in the 1920s, and that's one of the names. The other one is they refer to people from Wabash as cavemen because they're not quite as socially apt as other individuals. And Wabash refers to people from DePauw as the Dannies. It's another a word for an effeminate male back in the 1920s. And this is usually the argument going on. I won't tell you some of the things that they were yelling at each other during the game. It was not very nice. Anyway, that's so if identifying yourself with your in group, that would be um, uh, you at a basketball game or a football game from your school, and how you felt about the other team. That is you comparing yourself with the out group. That's like I said, it's just a small microcosm. Probably you know, and maybe have relatives at the other school, but you're supposed to dislike them. In group bias, the mere process of identifying yourself sets up a categorization process of creating groups of who we are, us, and who we are not, them. It is a natural reaction to maintain an in group bias, the tendency to favor one's own group over any competing group. Studies have shown that people from individualistic cultures maintain more in group bias than those with collectivistic from collectivistic cultures. A good example of this is the what's going on right now in politics with Republicans and Democrats. Republicans see Democrats as monsters, and Democrats see Republicans as mindless mega people, MAGA people, MAGA, make America great again, because Donald Trump has used that as his acronym, and he has hats with MAGA on it. And it seems to be separating people in the United States more and more and more. And that would be in-group bias. We love ourselves and we hate the other guys. Because of our social identification, we conform to our own group norms, sacrificing ourselves for our team, family, and nation. We dislike out-groups. The stronger we feel toward our in-group, the more prejudicially we react to threats from another group. When our group has been successful, we can also make ourselves feel better by identifying more strongly with it. In-group bias is the favoring of one's own group. This may lead to liking for the in-group, dislike for the out-group, liking for the in-group and disliking the out-group. Out-group stereotypes prosper when people feel strong in-group identity and when we are with our in-group members. The bias created is as from social comparison. The better your group is, the worse an out-group seems. And of course, we can see this in gangs and movies that portray gang members. We is good and they is bad. Once established, prejudice is maintained largely by inertia. When the society accepts the prejudice, most people will follow the path of least resistance and conform to the idea. They will act not so much out of a need to hate as much as out of a need to be liked and accepted by their own group. Studies in the American and African South from 1950s demonstrated that the more socially conforming an individual was, the more prejudiced they were. Social institutions, schools, government, the media will bolster prejudice through segregation, a social norm of separating racial or ethnic groups. Schools will reinforce dominant cultural attitudes through the images in their school texts to the attitudes reflected in their primary readers. Fun with Dick and Jane. This is what I read when I was back in the 1950s. And I can tell you that Dick, Jane, and Sally didn't have any African American or non-white friends. There they are again. There's Mom and Dad. Mom has blonde hair and Dad has brown hair. Sally has blonde hair. Sally, all the girls have blonde hair just like Mom, Sally and Jane. And Dick, of course, has brown hair just like his dad. See it go. Look, said Dick, see it go up. Jane said, oh, look, see it go up. Up, up, said Sally, go up, up, up. And of course, the friendly policeman bringing Sally back home after she wandered away. Advertising will perpetuate ideas and concepts merely with the focus of their pictures. Faceism is the showing of men's faces and women's bodies in advertising. There you go, man's face. What is this? Oh, of course, he knows Boss Systems. He knows audio systems. There you go. Beer, advertising beer. This is from Japan. Insurance advertisement. There's a guy's face. Nothing fake about him. Oh, Katy Perry. Pop chips. Polo. There's a guy that just don't care about the rest of him. We care about her body parts though. There we go. This is Keira Knightley, Coco Chanel, showing off her body. And the one negative view of a man's body, a fat guy jumping into a muddy pond. Frustration and aggression, the scapegoat theory. Researchers looking at the economic situations in the South between the Civil War and the Great Depression discovered that lynchings were more likely to take place when cotton prices were low and frustrations were high. When unemployment is low, societies accept more diversity and pass more anti-discrimination laws. During times of social upheaval, minority populations become readily available scapegoats to blame for a population's frustration. The defeated South targeted their former slaves. After Germany's defeat in World War I, the minority they chose to target were Jewish people. This may occur because when one group is frustrated, any success of the minority group is seen as adding to the frustration. And this is some of the anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic propaganda from Germany in between the wars. How do we know he's Jewish? Because of his nose. I don't have a second. Because of his nose. And once again, negative stereotypes about Jewish people. Another negative stereotype of Jewish people. The realistic group conflict theory purports that prejudice arises from competition between groups for scarce resources. In the United States, the strongest anti-black prejudice occurs among the people closest to the blacks on the socioeconomic ladder. In Canada, opposition to immigration fluctuates with the unemployment rate. To perceive ourselves as having status, we need people below us. When our status does not allow us to feel superior, prejudice does. Study after study has shown that when an individual has low self-esteem or has their self-esteem attacked, they're more likely to express polarized opinions that are more likely to reflect prejudice toward a select group. Research directly after World War II demonstrated that people who maintained prejudices against one group were more likely to maintain prejudice about other minorities. Ethnocentric people are people who believe in the superiority of one's own ethnic and cultural group and a corresponding disdain of all other groups. Ethnocentrics tend to share authoritarian tendencies. And of course, the Ku Klux Klan, that's one of the Confederate battle flags. Ku Klux Klan burning a cross. Those with authoritarian personalities tended to be intolerant of weakness, believe in punitive outcomes, be strangely submissive to in-group authority, be harshly disciplined as children, predisposed to focus on power and status, maintain an inflexible right-wrong way of thinking. Research seems to show that while the whole spectrum of political belief can show prejudice, right-wing authoritarians tend to be equal opportunity bigots. The same can be said of people who categorize people according to hierarchies of merit or goodness. Because of their staunch criteria, their social structure tends to be highly polarized. Humans try to simplify a complex world by dealing with it in stereotypes. We stereotype everything from cars to fast food restaurants. Without this form of categorization, we would be unable to make decisions, or we would tend to make the same mistake over and over again. And okay, would you rather have an SUV, a sports car, or a pickup truck? Now, personally, I drive a sports car. It looks kind of like that. But I doubt if anybody wants a sports car but me. Most people either want that vehicle or that vehicle. We find it especially easy and efficient to rely on stereotypes when pressed for time, preoccupied, tired, emotionally aroused, too young to appreciate diversity. Because of our social structure, Americans tend to automatically categorize people by race, ethnicity, and gender. It is common when seeing objects in a group to see them as more uniform than they really are. When this is done with people, it may create the outgroup homogeneity effect. Perception of an outgroup is more similar to one another than one's own in-group. Individuals recognize their own group as diverse, but outgroups as more alike. When people feel bad, they tend to perceive people and events in more negative light. I was watching a movie last night from the 1930s, and they were in France, and this one guy signed and they were in France at a hotel, and this guy signed the register. It said he was from New York City. And he said, "Oh, we've already got somebody from New York City. His name is Albert Sandin. Do you know him?" You know, as if everybody in New York City knows each other. And that's probably fairly common. You don't really realize how many people there are someplace else. Oh, you're from India. Do you know? I know somebody from India. Uh, you know, Charles Gupta. Do you know Charles Gupta? He's from New Delhi or something. Of course, there's what 1.2 billion people in India. People tend to see differences in the faces of their own racial group that tend to lump people from other groups together as looking alike. This is known as own race bias. This may be because the categorization process is delayed when looking at the face of someone from another race. The individual tends to focus on the racial differences. And of course, this is a problem when people identify each other. Um, they did a study, and what they determined was that when a white person looks at somebody, they look at their hair as because that's the difference. They see the difference in their hair, so it's easier for them to identify somebody who's white. If they look at somebody who's black, they look at their hair, and of course, uh, there's not very much difference um, between hair, not like there is among among white people. They have so many different shades and tones and hairstyles and whatnot. But when a black person looks at someone who is black, they look at their skin tone. And of course, white people don't look at skin tone when they look at each other's faces. They don't really see skin tone. They look at their hair. So it gets a little strange. Now, if you think everybody in this picture looks the same, you're right. An artist actually took his own face and he put it on everybody else's face. So yes, in this case, all these people from Korea look alike because they're the same person. When people are surrounded by people of another race or who look different, they tend to stand out as distinctive. We tend to focus on differences rather than similarities. Distinctiveness allows us to categorize individuals. Because difference is focused on, the individual good and bad aspects of the individual are exaggerated. As we were talking about stereotypes and prejudice, and so the one person that we notice in this picture, there's two people actually that we notice: the guy with the raincoat on and the young lady. Everyone else, we probably would have a difficult time identifying. As we are talking about stereotypes and prejudice, it must be remembered that people vary in stigma consciousness. They may hold stereotypes, but they may not assume that very many people will fit into their stereotype. The reverse of this is that people who see themselves as the victim of prejudice will tend to see themselves as frequent victims. It is normal for people to assume that when they do something that is negative, it is externally and situationally induced. However, when they see someone else doing something negative, very frequently they will assume that the act is caused by an inner disposition, and this is known as the fundamental attribution error. Sometimes people from an out-group will do something that is as ethical and more ethical than one's own in-group. Frequently, people will overlook this behavior as aberrant behavior for that group. This is known as group serving bias. At the same time, an individual might excuse the same behavior in their own group if it is a negative behavior. And we saw this with the Good Samaritan. Didn't I tell you? We already did the Good Samaritan story. This is a parable that was told by Jesus at one time. He was trying to show that just because somebody is different, they aren't bad. And that was the Samaritan, the hated people of old Israel. It was the Samaritan, the hated person that took care of the injured man, and the holy people just ignored him because he was naked and they couldn't touch him. Many people see the world as just a place and people getting just what they deserve. Therefore, a person wouldn't have an accident unless they were drunk or driving incorrectly. This is known as a just world phenomenon. People get what they deserve and deserve what they get. People who maintain staunch stereotypes seem to be able to maintain them despite the evidence of to the contrary. Often they do this by subtyping the stereotype. Subtyping is accommodating individuals who deviate from one stereotype by splitting off a subgroup stereotype, middle-class blacks, feminist women. These are these are people we see as subgroups. Some people will take one experience and generalize it into a group stereotype. This is known as illusory correlation, the false impression that two variables correlate. The media will sometimes create illusory correlation by accentuating differences more readily than similarities. While the media may be seeking sensationalism, in the less astute they may be creating illusory correlations about a population. And we have seen this in the past in certain places where they have African American and large African American and white populations. News programs, and you see this in the paper from time to time. If you read the paper, I guess nobody's reading newspapers anymore. But once upon a time, if an African American committed a crime, they showed his picture. And if a white guy committed a crime, they didn't show his picture. So it gave people the idea that black people committed crimes and white people were totally innocent. And that is the end of the chapter. So that's it, last chapter. So we are finished as far as this is concerned. I need you guys to finish all your coursework, get all your research done, write your paper, finish your quizzes, and get it in before the end of the semester, and everybody will be happy, especially me, because I'll be able to give you a passing grade, and that'll be nice. Okay, I'll talk to you in another class, possibly. Talk to you later.